Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Steam Zone time. Ben, welcome back, bud. How we doing?
Good. Another great week. Government shutdown, but we're still thriving here, so...
I'll tell you, in DC this week, around the Association of the U.S. Army, AUSA annual meeting, you wouldn't have known the government was shut down, Ben. There were people everywhere. Inside the conference center, a lot of people outside the conference center, a lot of the chitty chat, a lot of happy hour going on. DC was open for business.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to some AUSA topics this week.
All right, well, let's start us off. You've got one top of the list here. The Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, was kind of on fire at AUSA, made some news. Start us off, Ben. What was something that Secretary Driscoll said that caught your attention?
Yeah, he gave a really interesting speech at AUSA, a keynote speech, talking about new technology, talking about how do we become more agile, how do we become more lethal, how do we get better. Touched on a lot of subjects, but I think one he spent some time on is, as I'm sure you're not surprised by, the broken acquisitions process, and specifically this idea of right to repair, which is, if I buy something from you, Noah, can I repair it, or do I need your permission to repair it, right? If I buy my Toyota, can I take it to any mechanic? Can I just fix it on my own if I know how to do it? Or do I have to go to the Toyota authorized mechanic? And this is a huge issue for these massive weapon systems because, or not massive weapon systems, but expensive pieces of gear, because if you can only go to one authorized dealer, guess who has pricing power? Not the American taxpayer, the OEM who makes the equipment.
Toyota Inc., baby, and they do. They freaking always want you to go back. In fact, I've seen right to board with a dog, Ben. Have you ever got a dog from a breeder? They make you bring the thing back to the breeder. It's crazy. Not so much with kennels. Adopt people. Adopt your dogs. Anyway, back at it.
Exactly, though. It is something that the Army doesn't, DoD writ large, doesn't have uniformly. It does exist on some things, and it's something that is, at least the Secretary has said, is something that he is going to make sure happens in all new contracts. So that is exciting if it occurs, and will be exciting to me as a taxpayer to save some dollars.
Let's break it down for folks a little bit. The right to repair, the ability to fix something yourself or to take it to whatever dealer or aftermarket supplier you may choose. Does the Army have that right today?
You know, it depends on each and every contract, right? What is written into the contract? So there is no answer to your question. It depends. I'd say read the contract.
Great. It's on a deal-by-deal or a contract-by-contract basis. And so what is the Secretary actually proposing? What is going to change as a result of this speech?
It seems like he is proposing and has already been doing this before. So it's not just for the speech that he was announcing this, but that the right to repair is going to be built into every contract at non-negotiable. This is going to be how the Army writes contracts.
Got it. So this is now the default. Any punitive measures for those who do not comply? Are we seeing anything about what's the stick to? I'm not sure if there's a carrot. What's the enforcement mechanism for this policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that is the crux of it. Do we have, a lot of these great ideas? Do we have the ability in the DOW to actually execute and do it? And how do you execute it? You need a contracting officer who understands the idea of right to repair. I think we think of contracting officers as you must study and memorize the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Requirements, right?
Federal Acquisition Regulation.
It's this long, insane document that has tons and tons of clauses and sections that dictate how to write a contract. It is, of course, important, but you also need to have conceptual understandings outside of that document. I might need the right to repair. And the same thing exists in software, the right to your own data. What does that mean? And so I think this is great if true, but you need to empower contracting officers. By empowering them, I mean get contracting officers who are trained. If they've been studying the FAR their whole career, but not how right to repair works, not how to write to your own data works, not how software architecture works, we're not equipping them properly. And then we need to hold them accountable, right? Once we've trained them, we shouldn't hold them accountable until we give them the tools to do it, right? But hey, there needs to be a stick if you do not build the right contracts, right? There's like the don't get fired if you buy IBM. Well, also, you should get fired, or, not immediately, but we can figure out a fair and proper process but there should be a punitive measure if you're not doing these things that at the secretary level they're demanding.
Yep.
And by the way, are good for the American taxpayer.
I think there is an interesting question here about the limits of this policy. So right to repair with hardware makes a ton of sense. Right to repair with software, you talked about the parallel to owning your data. Some people want to take it farther, though. Some people would like to, push back against the idea of commercially owned software. Say, great, you can have commercially owned software, but we as the government should retain the rights to modify commercially owned software. Where do you come down on that?
I mean, I'm sure he has some thoughts on that, not in this speech, but I think there has to be a way, of course, in an emergency situation, that the government can do that. But I think the government is better as a system integrator, being the ultimate system integrator, a smart system integrator that takes together different software pieces. To be a good system integrator, you need to own the data that goes across those systems, and you need to instill, a systems architecture of the overall system that is one that allows the data to move freely. If you have data that moves freely and there is no vendor lock at the data level, then you can put out a new solicitation if a vendor isn't performing, and the market will work, and people will compete to go do that thing that a vendor that you don't like is doing. But if the data is locked in that vendor's system, then it doesn't matter. You can't actually have that competition. So you just need to enable competition, and then you don't need to worry about the things you're talking about, in my mind, that the government can get the outcome they want. To get that outcome, though, they need to have the safeguards in place to be able to move that data wherever it needs to go, so they can seamlessly go to any vendor, right? You or I, when we're using Gmail for our email, I have zero worries that if Gmail starts sucking, that I could not export all my data from Gmail and move to Yahoo, right?
I have some concerns. I'm not sure I can take my iMessages off my iPhone and move them over to the new paper phone that I want, which looks like a Kindle. I'm excited about that, but I'm a little worried about my data from the iPhone, and I'm a little bit worried about the social cost of having my green bubbles pop up. Here's where I think we come down on this, or how I come down on this, is when you talk about the ability of the government to modify, Noah Corp or Ben Corp or flip source code, that starts to get a little hairy, with one or two major exceptions. And that is when I've been on the other side of this, especially when the government's working with startups, there will be a clause occasionally inserted into a software contract, especially if it's a license or any kind of SaaS, that source code be put in escrow in the event that the company go out of business.
Sure.
Now, why does this make sense? If little company X, gets their SBIR, they overextend themselves trying to deliver, the government's invested in that code, right? As long as they get what they're paying for, all good. But if that company makes a decision to shut down and exit the business, the government shouldn't be shit out of luck. The government should still have access to the product that they have paid for. And so putting that source code in escrow, I think that makes perfect sense. The idea, hey, government's got to be able to code alongside you as you're developing a COTS product, that's less my speed. But I don't think that's what Driscoll's suggesting here. And I think we can go ahead and say, hey, for you at home, staying apprised of how this plays out through contracting officer guidance, this may be something you start to see more of where, hey, if you're selling a hardware product, you're going to be expected to make that product modifiable by other OEMs or by the government itself.
And guess what will happen, though, Noah? If you make that happen, if there is a right to repair, that will push the cost down. And you won't actually need to do the repair because the government will be able to just go buy that piece competitively.
Let's see. We shall see. All right. Let's stay. We'll close that tab, but we will stay with Secretary Driscoll here for a second, Ben. Did you see the news? He's one of the greatest boosters of nuclear that I know. Ben Jacobson right here, ladies and gentlemen. Secretary Driscoll's joining you in the arena, my friend. Did you see the news about Project Janus?
No, tell me about it.
All right. Here's what happened, folks. Secretary Driscoll, the Army, they have now announced a next-generation nuclear power program that's going to deliver, as they call it, resilient, secure, and assured energy to support national defense installations and critical missions. TLDR, bottom line up front, microreactors on bases, baby. That's what we got here. This is in accordance with the President's Executive Order 14299, deploying advanced nuclear reactor technologies for national security. Starting no later than September 30th, 2028, the Army, the executive agent for this directive, will be responsible for putting those nuclear microreactors online at a military base. There's another piece of this that I think is very welcome news in the defense tech entrepreneur community. So listen up. This is not just about nuclear. The news is that the reactors will be commercially owned and operated, with milestone payments to help companies close their business cases, right, to continue to mature on that lead up to September 2028. Now, why is this a huge, whopping deal? The supply that is now coming into this defense market from startups, from the venture community funding those startups, it's reliant on big outcomes, big capital O outcomes. They need to see that the military is going to modernize how they buy this sort of thing. Now, 10 years ago, Ben, this sort of program, it would have been awarded to a services firm that would have built a nuclear reactor on a base. Lord knows what the cost would have been for such a thing, right? It would have been a 10-year program, and it would have cost probably billions of dollars. Instead, all of the venture funding that's come in here and pulled forward the research and development, Valor Atomics, Radiant, there's actually, probably close to a dozen of these companies right now working on nuclear energy, microreactors. They are now being rewarded with a major acquisition that is not just validating their technology, it's validating their business model. And so this is exciting. 9 bases, reactors on 9 bases, and that is just the start. That is not interesting only to the nuclear energy community. That is interesting if you are building anything in defense. It is a signal from the Department of War that they are paying attention to the way the product is being developed commercially. So Ben, is this the first of many? Is this part of a larger trend? Are we seeing other areas where the military or the Department of War is taking a similar approach?
I think not. I'm sure there are other areas, and I'm excited to see where they go. I think one this could be applied to, but we're not there yet, is drones, right? And so I think across drones, when we think about, it doesn't seem like there is a lead kind of overarching theme with an end state so clearly defined, right? It seems like drones are the answer to everything, and maybe not actually, we're not sure what they're solving. So there's this, that I think comes then with this integration gap, right? Where we don't really have a common digital or operational backbone on the operational side of doing it, and then also on the buying procurement side, right? And so that could also help with like a regulatory synchronization, right? Like how are we thinking FAA, DoD, allied airspace, and both operationally and again in procurement, right? And then putting that industrial base coherence together too, where it's just so fragmented. Could we get some more clear, open standards to basically stabilize the whole thing? What do you think, Noah?
Yeah, I think it's an example of what it could look like when it's done well. I think on the drone side, we've not seen this. There was some hope that maybe Replicator would be this. We simply haven't seen it yet. I think the hope is that there are more that follow in this footprint. Let's see. We got to get to the finish line. Replicator was announced, and then it's been a few years. We're now just announcing Project Janus. Let's see where we are in 2028. The hope is that these things come online, and it's safely and it's done efficiently, and more follow suit. Let's go ahead and close that one out. I do think it's a good segue. Why are we doing this, Ben? Why are we so focused on energy? Why are we focused on bringing all of this new capability online? It's for our old friends out east, right? The number one, or what used to be called the pacing threat. I don't know what we're calling it now. We haven't seen the NDS yet, National Defense Strategy, hopefully soon. But it wouldn't be a week on the steam zone without a little bit of China. What's going on out east, Ben?
Yeah, Chinese Coast Guard rams a Filipino fishery boat. Filipinos respond and say they are illegally fishing. Chinese saying it's illegal encroachment, and they're saying it's their territorial waters. So we got an old-fashioned territorial dispute, which, I lived this when I was on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, floating through some of these waters, or close to some of these waters. And this is going on every single day. We talk about reindustrialization. We're going to do cool stuff to great power competition. But this is the day-to-day life. What do you think about this story?
Yeah, this is such a classic kind of boil the frog example of how the Overton window in foreign affairs shifts. And for folks who are like, why is he using those weird words? Let me just make this plain English for you, right? This is the latest fight in a long string of fights around sovereignty in the South China Sea, in what China sees as its area of influence, its zone of influence. These things were happening day after day. It's normal out there at this point. We don't even cover it very much in the news anymore. But this was, when it first started happening, this was a big deal. The micro battles that happen, that whittle away at an adversary's will to contest. The Philippines are like, what are we going to start a war with China over this every time they tussed up one of our fishing boats? We don't want a war with China, right? And you just kind of, all right, fine, we'll fish a little closer to the shore, a little closer to the shore, a little closer to the shore. Before you know it, your sovereignty is eroded. So there was once upon a time where the United States would puff out our chests and we would say, thou shalt not do that to those poor Filipino fishermen. I'm sure there are diplomatic rebukes happening behind closed doors, but you got to think, how does that play relative to the negotiations coming up around rare earth mineral restrictions, man? Like, where do you think that is on the Filipino fishermen and the rare earth mineral restrictions? I would argue that probably high on Secretary of State Rubio's list is maybe not the Filipino fishermen. It might be down there in the teens, maybe in the 20s, in terms of his list of priorities. So by just doing this is a perfect example, though, for folks here at home who say, well, we don't really know what China will do as a world power. Like, maybe they're very calm and peaceful and they like to just stay within their borders. It's like, we've seen this pattern start to play out over the last 2 decades, right? We may not always pay attention. We may not always be listening. This is who they are. This is how they operate. They have sharp elbows and they will do what they can get away with. And so we'd be wise, I think, to learn from this example. And even if the United States is not prepared to, and nor should we, go to war over a little good old-fashioned fisherman boat ramming, it's important to include this in the data set of understanding of how the CCP and how the People's Republic of China operates in their neighborhood.
I think those are all great points, Noah. What I would add in is exactly what you say about the boiling the frog. Yes, there are higher ticket items on Secretary Rubio's plate, but each of these little things, each of these micro battles adds up, and it can create a feeling around the region. It can affect who our allies are. These little things matter, right? The whole revolution for America started with a little tea party. These small things add up. Let's keep tracking this and monitoring it.
Tea party in Boston, little fish party in the Philippines. Who knows? Who's to say? The possibilities are endless. All right, let's go ahead and close that one out. Now let's go ahead and welcome to the program, speaking of China, speaking of the effort here at home to safeguard what is all that is pure about American manufacturing, we're going to go ahead and welcome in from the shop floor, Justin Baucum, Isembard, USA. All right, now entering the steam zone, we have Justin Baucum, the GM of Isembard. He's not cosplaying manufacturing. He's not dabbling in reindustrialization. This is the real deal. Justin, from special operations to the shop floor, tell us the journey you've been on. What is driving you to be standing right in front of that big old American flag today?
Well, first off, Noah, kudos on nailing the name the first time. Both my last name, people like to throw in like an L for some reason. And then Isembard, the most common pronunciation is like Isengard from like Lord of the Rings. They're not affiliated in any way, but I can see where it comes from. But yeah, I got involved with Isembard. First kind of conversations were just after the new year, and then came on board fully in May of this year. And so this is still relatively new for me. Prior to joining Isembard, I hadn't thought about manufacturing at all. It was just kind of like a thing that happened somewhere in a facility. What really attracted me to it, and I think maybe starting with just like the industry as a whole, is that manufacturing seemed to be this unexplored area for me, obviously as an individual, but there was just all sorts of opportunity. And so something from the military that we talked a lot about is like target-rich environments, which just means there's a bunch of opportunity. And in my first conversation with Alexander Fitzgerald, who's the founder and CEO, I think our first introduction was like 15 minutes, and I walked away from that conversation being like, I want to join this company and I want to learn about manufacturing. And I told him, it wasn't with the intent of like, hey, please interview me further and all that stuff, but it was like a genuine, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I think the vision of what you're trying to build is extraordinary, and I don't think a lot of people are doing the stuff that you're doing. And so to be a part of that mission, I like to say when I was in the military, I was hyper focused on whatever mission set that we were dealing with. It was like mission first, men, like the team, and then me comes last. And so that's kind of a philosophy that I've carried post-military. But quite frankly, in other places that I've been in, it's always been kind of like, this is interesting, but I'm not really feeling that sense of purpose. And here I very much do. There's a really clear mission. It transcends just like the four walls that we're standing in. We're doing something that hopefully has much more long-lasting implications on both sides of the Atlantic, being, having activity in the UK where we're headquartered, and then the side of the business that I'm leading here in the States.
Yeah, so take us through the nitty-gritty for someone who is totally never been in a manufacturing floor, spends their whole time coding.
Yeah.
Tell us what you guys are making and how it works.
Yeah, I think an important thing is to help people have just kind of the right mental model or visual representation. So for me, and I found this to be somewhat true of a lot of folks that aren't directly connected to the industry, my mental model for what manufacturing looked like was like an assembly line of maybe cars getting made and people pulling levers, and like a giant, maybe like 1 million square foot facility. And that's absolutely an aspect of manufacturing. Like, cars are made that way. But what we're doing is within the confines of what's typically referred to as like a machine shop, job shop, any of those variations. And we employ very specific manufacturing methods at this point. We'll continue to expand, but the ones where you see the biggest range of capability are one through milling, which is just like extracting a bunch of pieces of metal from a larger hunk of metal to turn it into the shape or component that you need. And then the other machine, I actually have one over here, is a mill turn, and so like a lathe, so spins, and then pieces get removed, and again, same outcome. There's a component that is useful in some way, shape, or form. For folks that haven't had the benefit of stepping into one of these places, it basically goes, raw materials come in, they get cut down to whatever size that you need to roughly fit into the machine. The machine does its magic. There's a lot that goes into that. But then the desired output is that you now have a component to something that you can put into, let's say, like an aerospace type platform. Maybe that's a rocket or hypersonic something. For a defense company, maybe that's a drone or an autonomous vehicle, something of that nature. And so it's something that, in order to have the end product that we all see and appreciate, unless it's like a biologic, it probably goes through some sort of manufacturing method at some instance. So pretty much like the world around us is filled with things that have been machined in some aspect. And that's where kind of we sit. We're in the business of making things that serve like a greater purpose or that fit into some larger product.
That was awesome. So Justin, when you see the momentum that kind of, I don't know, some of it exists on the internet, but some of it is in real life. We have things like the Reindustrialize Summit. We're just at AUSA this week with a bunch of folks who are talking about manufacturing, making things here in the U.S. again.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, as someone who's actually doing this, how much of this is real? Are you seeing change in the kinds of companies that are entering the space and what they're actually doing? Or is it still kind of at the level of conversation right now? Like, how much is translating into your world?
Yeah, I'm sure there's activity that I'm not aware of. What I am aware of is a lot of, let's just, again, not to pick on anyone in particular, but like, let's say in the defense industry. So a founder has an idea, we're going to make this a drone, because for simplicity's sake. And maybe they're trying to figure out how do we mass produce these at scale. So maybe that involves like 3D printing some parts. Maybe it involves some assembly work of different fashions. I think people are starting to realize it's difficult to find components that we need for like a bespoke product without it being customized and made by like a subcontract manufacturer, which is what we are. I haven't seen a whole lot of activity focused on this segment of the supply chain. There's a lot on the end product. We need something viable that's going to offer some degree of deterrence or solve some problem that we have with a product that's on the other side of the fence. But not a lot of people are looking at how do we make all the bits and pieces at scale to allow us to make tens of thousands. And so where I get concerned is when I hear these numbers getting thrown out of like, we need 1 million fill in the blank. And it's like, cool, well, each of the things that you're describing takes 150 pieces. And so now we're talking an exponential number, and that's just for one platform. While there's activity on how do we get the design engineered in such a way that we can mass produce it, that's great, but you still deal with the fundamental problem of making the actual parts. I haven't seen a lot of investment, quite frankly, besides the part that's actually making parts for companies that have those ambitions to be able to get into the thousands and tens of thousands range of products. I think the concept, I think everyone agrees, like reshoring, reindustrializing, it's a semi-popular thing to talk about these days, but I haven't seen a whole lot of like net new machine shops stood up. There's a very strong industrial base, and I talked to a handful of these folks, privately owned businesses that have been doing this for 10, 15, 20, sometimes longer years. I always say they're kind of the unsung heroes of the industrial base that never get the recognition they've deserved. They're the people who are actually making the cool defense hardware that we need. But as a macro view, those are starting to go away because they're not able to stay in business because of fluctuations in demand. Maybe people are aging out. And so we're headed toward a real supply problem as demand starts to ramp up. And hopefully we don't have like a global event like COVID again, or another war or anything like that, because then we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble in terms of our ability to mass produce things. We're already struggling to keep up.
Maybe just, it sounds like a machine's maybe kicking in a gear behind you there. Give us the...
Yeah, so we have a Lamborghini for the shop next door. They work on very expensive cars, and they just, I get a oogle over it every day when I look out my window.
There's a little sales pitch for anybody considering working at Isembard.
Yes, sponsoring the Steam Zone soon, Lamborghini.
We've been hearing they're in the market for podcasts.
I'll accept a free ride.
Yeah, I want to try something different here. Sometimes we'll do like Justin's call for startups. I actually want to try something different. Let's say someone wants to answer the call, because we meet these people every day, young people who they're graduating university, or they're graduating from a trade school, or they're graduating high school, and they're like, I don't want to go to college, I want to get in the game. Give Justin's playbook for somebody who they want to reindustrialize America, they want to be in on the manufacturing renaissance here in this country. What if you had to start from scratch, if you were in their shoes, what would you do?
Depends on what their end goal is. I think if it's somebody with the ambition of, hey, I want to like have a business, maybe there's an entrepreneurial bent, and they're like, manufacturing is the industry I want to be involved in, but I want to be a business owner. I would say for them, one way that they can do it is partnering with us, because part of our business model is to franchise machine shops. And so historically, franchising and manufacturing haven't really gone together. There's a scene, if y'all are familiar with the movie Founder, which is the kind of the history of McDonald's, there's kind of this vision of what that's going to be, and it's like every small town in the U.S. is going to have a church, a school, and McDonald's. We basically want to be the fourth business and an Isembard factory. We're trying to make it really easy where you don't have to deal with all the peripheral things that come along with starting a business from scratch, de-risking it for folks, and then giving them a playbook of, we've already vetted, like, these are the best machines. This is the best programming software. We have access to talent. We have access to engineering folks. We'll help with the financial setup and all those different logistics that come with starting a business. And then they can do what hopefully they want to do, which is make things, because that's what we're all here to do. So that's one of the beauties of like Isembard as a business. We have everyone from software engineers to hands-on engineering folks, but everybody makes parts, which is a wonderful thing. Like, we all have gotten our hands real dirty with the dust of aluminum and have all sorts of fluids that are in the machines all over ourselves. But I think it's important to be close to that. I would say another avenue is if somebody just has the ambition to work within this industry and maybe not be a business owner, getting into CNC programming is an excellent way to do that. You can go to a machine shop, you'll probably be allowed to sweep the floor initially, and then you'll kind of have to progress, and it's going to be really dependent on the more senior folks that are there. There's not a lot of well-charted pathways for folks to just make entry, and that's something that we're trying to help solve as well by creating some really clear pathways, whether you're on the entrepreneurial side or you're just somebody that would love to work around this and within this industry. It's like, we'll map the pathway for you.
Amazing. Justin, really appreciate that. If folks want to learn more, maybe they want to become an Isembard franchisee, where can they learn more?
You can reach out to me directly, isembard.com. There is a tab and that is just exclusively for franchisees. We'll be doing some pretty aggressive recruiting efforts for our franchisees, especially here in the US. That's already kind of underway in the UK, but just crossed some legal hurdles with franchising here in the States. And so we're basically full steam ahead now.
Steam ahead. The pun is intended. Thank you for joining us here on the Steam Zone, Justin. We're excited to have you back anytime, and thanks for what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
So what do you think, Ben? Another day, another opportunity for you to hang up the software cleats and strap on some manufacturing boots? What'd you think?
Yeah, let's start welding. Next week on the Steam Zone, we'll do Welding 101. How to use Claude GPT to help you.
Claude Code from the shop floor. Coming soon to a Steam Zone near you. All right. One more guest joining us now. It's some people's favorite time of week. Not Ben's, but some people watch this program, this illustrious program, for the jobs. This week, we got a good one for you.
Today with us, we got Austin Anderson, the Director of Intelligence from Spear AI. Austin, welcome to the Steam Zone.
Thanks for having me, Noah.
You guys are moving fast, you're growing fast, but you're still in the infancy, man. What is Spear AI working on?
I think that you could really couch what Spear is doing into one core conviction, which is the idea that acoustic data, passive acoustic data, is being underutilized. The premise is to establish a data set that is generally hard for the public to get access to this type of data. And so establishing that data set and then applying AI techniques to classify this passive acoustic data could provide really impactful solutions to the DoD and mission partners around the world. Spear AI is tackling this head on. So we have a hardware, we have a software, and we have a services component. All of them are really geared around AI expertise of passive acoustic classification and really trying to get after it.
Very cool. So how big's the team now? What are you growing to? Give us some of the baseball stats, the background, the demographics.
Absolutely. We're at around 50 people now. We're hoping to double in the next year. We just signed a really big contract with the Navy to build out our buoy technology, highly trimmable buoys that we would drop all over the place, use them to triangulate motion in the water and try and address the issue of what people are referencing as the kill ratio, where if you use a really pristine object that costs millions of dollars to knock out a relatively cheap technology, there's an incongruency there that should be addressed.
And where are you guys based? A remote team, you got a couple offices, we all in one place? Give us the geo.
Yeah, we're based in DC right now. We have offices in Falmouth and Duluth, Massachusetts. We have a couple offices. We're pretty remote, and part of that is just having a hardware component. We want to be in an area that we can stand up some factory space, as well as having kind of a remote structure for some of the software product engagements, and then services primarily based in DC, and then we have engagements around the rest of the country.
There's a lot going on with this team, man. 6 months in, you guys are firing on all cylinders, a lot of things. So let's narrow it down for folks. What is the job of the week? Lay it out for us.
Absolutely. So what I'm here to pitch right now is a software engineering position supporting an IC component in the DC area, looking for one really talented engineer that has some experience working high side, has a certain ethos that we like to maintain in the company, which is just kind of overkill, get after it, really move, try and take complete ownership of a solution. Don't wait for someone to tell you something, go and look for something and kill it. That's really the individual we're looking for. If they don't have a poly at the time of application, that's okay, we can work through that, but really just looking for that individual that has the culture and the technical background and a baseline clearance and a desire to work a company that's trying to change some of the kind of ossified structures in the DoD from an innovative approach.
Like it. All right. So, cleared engineer. This means if someone doesn't know when you're talking about high side, if they're scratching their head saying, what is that? Probably not the right role for them, right? We need someone with an active top secret security clearance. What's the day-to-day of this role look like? Who are they working with? And what are they going in? Are they at the client? Are they at your HQ?
Yeah, it's an extremely dynamic role. Supporting on client site would involve policy work, hands-on keyboard, designing actual impactful solutions. Part of the role would be travel 25 to 50% of the time, so you'd be on a flyaway team and moving around a bit. You have a wide range things that you could get involved with from the client perspective. Part of the way that we are moving the structure at Spear is to have switch hitters, if you will, where you're going to have people that work on site and are going to be fully dedicated to client solutions. And like as they're working there, you can take some of that expertise and some of that domain knowledge and apply it to the product side and do some product support in an off client site, and kind of one hand washes the other. And there's that feedback cycle between the two.
Very cool. What's the client team look like from Spear? Who goes forward so that they can get a sense of who they'd be seeing day to day from the company?
Yeah. So in terms of who goes forward, we primarily try to structure people who have a background in DoD engagements, kind of working in the types of environments that we'd be working in, because those present unique challenges that I think sometimes solution providers aren't ready for if they don't have the background of working in an environment like you would be for this role. And we definitely look for that hybrid person that has the ability to engage with people and work through problems, engage stakeholders, thread the needle between a disparate group of individuals, but can also deploy and build a prototype and create something unique that can help everyone.
Brag on the team a little, man. Like you obviously chose to work there. You're surrounded by great people. These are mission-driven individuals. If you were giving us the highlight reel of some of the coolest things that some of your team members have accomplished, like why should people want to work with these guys and gals?
Yeah, I think that's a really easy one. If you want to go see the 50 individuals, we keep our bios up to date on the website. Like that's easy because I think it's an incredible group of people. That's one of the things I love about the company. But I'll select a couple if you asked. The co-founders, John McGonigal and Michael Hunter, are both veterans. John McGonigal served in the Navy for about 30 years. He was a naval submarine commander, nuclear submarine commander for a couple of those years. And Michael Hunter worked Intel side for a couple of years and then worked at AWS for about 4 years. And then the two of them decided to start this company. They bring a really deep perspective across real world experiences. Commanding a nuclear submarine, I just think you can't replace that kind of leadership experience. And then a really technical understanding from the Intel side, as well as at AWS, understanding kind of the key commercial players in the space that Mike Hunter brings. So the two of them, phenomenal duo to lead the company.
Very cool. But you guys are hiring a bunch of other things. If maybe people like what they're hearing, they think Spear's really cool, but they don't necessarily fit this role. Are there other opportunities for them right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, there's kind of a bifurcated approach in the company. We have products and we have services. Products are things like Forerunner, which is an edge device we have currently running on nuclear submarines to classify passive acoustic data. We have the buoys, like I mentioned. We have some software products one of them is called Horizon. It integrates a lot of these hardware sensors into a COP, or common operating picture. So we have openings around the products. If you're not into the high side, the cleared role that is not as attractive to you, then we have those other roles that are more product and development based from both the hardware and software side. And then within services, we have the really great problem of demand outstripping supply. So if we have a multifarious array of opportunities across mission engineers, software engineers, action officers, all of which would be supporting a really dynamic task force that is modeled after Project Maven and Project Harbinger, both of which our company founders were involved with and contributed to in big ways.
Where should people go to learn more? Plug the website.
Spear.ai.
Spear.ai.
Yeah.
Last question. Did you in fact run the Ironman Maryland?
I did. I ran, swam, and biked, and I
yes.
barely got through. No. It's good.
It betrays my ignorance. There are actually 3 athletic events in an Ironman.
No, there are, and the swim is, I don't know if you'd call the swim athletic event for me. It was just trying not to drown.
You got through it. That's what matters. All right, Austin, thank you for being here. Spear AI, software engineer.
And we're back. These jobs are hot. There's a lot of hiring going on in this industry. All right, I held you back. I know you were ready to fire about 5 minutes ago, but now, Ben, it is time for your favorite part of the week.
Okay, Noah, this week, a lot of conferences going on, even through the government shutdown, AUSA and others. And I know AUSA doesn't charge a ticket. I get it. But we know it actually does cost money, right? Time is money. No, a lot of things are money, right? Like your flight, your hotel room, right? Especially in a busy city, in a busy week. Who does that keep out, right? You run a company, you're going to expense to your company. Hey, if I'm a kid, if I'm a high school student who's really interested in engineering, I'm a college student thinking about what I do next, these things are inaccessible to me, right? That there is a reinforcing ecosystem of I'm already in the industry, so I can expense it, so I can go to the next conference, but it is not a friendly place, these conferences, if you're an outsider. So we need to figure out a way, and this is not we need more on-ramps buzzword. It is, how do we actually make this world accessible to people who might want to try it, who are interested in it, without getting them to commit thousands of dollars? There is tons of ways to get, if I'm a student and I'm really interested in car manufacturing on a campus, to go to the car club that's building an engine, to go to do stuff. How do we do that for this ecosystem to make it something that isn't just pay to play? We got to find a way to do that so that we can get the best talent.
Yeah, I think, get a job, join the Palantir Fellowship, join the military. There's some ways, but I hear you, the point's taken. We got to let people experiment. They get a little taste, they'll go deeper. Maybe we get a little student housing. Maybe we need a student dorm room at some of these events. We get the bunk beds, get everybody out there to DC for the next big one. All right, well, here's what I'm steaming this week, man. I'll tell you what, I took the plunge. I took the plunge last week, and I bought what I used to think was a tool of the bourgeoisie, and that is a reverse osmosis water filter. Lord knows what the hell I'm doing with this thing. It sits on the counter. I got to fill up the thing. Let me tell you something. I did not know what kind of water poverty I was living in until I started drinking reverse osmosis water. This stuff is pristine. It doesn't have any of the same taste as before. And here's why. My building last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't remember at this point, I turned on the water. There was brown stuff coming out. And the superintendent said, oh, it's just the wood from the tank. Listen, I found out this place has pipes that haven't been changed in 150 years, right? The pipe bursted when it came through one guy's ceiling, went in another guy's bathroom. The whole apartment was getting all messed up. This is New York City plumbing. This is what you got, 130. This building's got good bones. But I'll tell you what, the pipes, they're a little old. This is the state of American infrastructure, Ben. We got crumbling pipes. They're spitting out brown goo in the gutters. So I got to go buy myself a reverse osmosis water filter. I'm spending some money for some thing sitting on my tank, and it beeps at me. I feel like I'm in Japan in the Tokyo electronics market. It's beeping funny sounds when the water is ready. I'll tell you what. Two things can be true. One, I love this thing. I love my filtered water. It's delicious. Two, we in America shouldn't have to buy countertop water filters. There's way worse people. There are people throughout this country who have it way, way worse. The quality of drinking water in this country is going downhill. It's unacceptable. It's the lifeblood of human civilization. It's the lifeblood of human life. We need clean water in this country. We need the infrastructure to be repaired. We need a little bit of proactive maintenance. We can't be waiting for things to crumble around us. All right? So I'm team infrastructure. It doesn't mean I need a big bill from Washington. It just means we got to figure out how to keep our people drinking water, not sludge.
I also have reverse osmosis water, so we're fully uploaded on the Steam Zone here.
They're going to call this thing the Bourgeoisie Zone next week, Ben.
Yeah. All right, great week, Noah. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for watching.
Okay.